Fantastic. Great. Good morning, everybody. We are going to let folks just funnel into the Zoom room here, but thanks for those of you who have been with us across a couple of these sessions over the past 2 days. Welcome back. It's great to have everybody joining us again. This is the final in our 4-part series on the New York Wine and Grape Foundation's export program activities. This time we're going to be focusing on Asia Pacific markets of Hong Kong, South Korea, and Vietnam. And as many of you know, I'm Val Ross from the New York Wine and Grape Foundation staff team, part of the intrepid group of folks who are helping to support you in the export program every single year. Again, for those of you who've been around for these sessions and for many years in the export program, you may know the names and faces, but we have some new wineries and representatives joining us today. So hello to you all. We want to make sure that you know the team that's working for you so that you are familiar with them when they come across your email inbox. This program, as I've said before, is extremely important to the foundation team, its staff and board, and certainly the wineries that participate. Over and above the sales and brand recognition that we hope to provide for your own wineries, we do believe this program has been really critical in helping the foundation put New York wines as a whole top of mind for trade media and consumers in our key target markets. So we're excited to be here for many, many years. So since 1993, we are proud to say that we've had funding from the USDA's Foreign Ag Service. And they, along with the funding support, which is critical, they have a team in each of our target markets, the local attachés and the agricultural counselors. They've been extremely helpful to our market reps like Matthew, who you're going to meet in a moment, and the folks that you've seen across the other seminars to help promote our events and the brand of New York wine. So we appreciate their support as well. And so again, as part of our team, I'm pleased to kind of welcome Tamara Thorberg from our activity management partner, Bryant Christie International. BCI is really our key partner, making sure that the foundation's export program is focused in its activities. We are certainly compliant in our activities and strategic. And with BCI's assistance and Tamara's partnership and her team, we've been able to constantly focus on improving the program, doing more, and also the USDA has recognized some of our improvements and increased our budget pretty much year over year for the last 3 years, and we're at over $670,000 as a total budget for our program. So again, Tamara, thank you to you and your team for all of your help. I know that you are a critical partner. We enjoy working with you, and I know that all of our market reps do too. So I wanted to give you a chance to kick today's seminar off.
Thanks, Val. And
Sure.
Yeah, nice to reminisce on that. Definitely a team effort, I'd say, in securing additional funding. We have a great team on board. But yeah, hello everyone again. Yes, we at Bryant Christie, we've been partnering with the New York Wine and Grape Foundation since 2020 to help manage and execute all activities for the export program. And I know many of you have heard my introduction from the first 3 target market sessions. So I just want to say, it's been a real pleasure to work with all of you to promote New York wines overseas and to foster real opportunities for you to find international representation and increase export sales. So to kind of wrap up with our last session of the 4, we're very excited to introduce Matthew McFetridge from FLX International. He manages our efforts in the Asia Pacific markets, which includes Hong Kong, South Korea, and Vietnam. Matthew's been a longtime partner of the foundation, and he brings a lot of valuable expertise and knowledge to the team, not only being from the Finger Lakes and having a deep understanding of the New York wine industry, but also having spent extensive time in Asia and building up a great network of contacts and partnerships in our target markets. In fact, Matthew just wrapped up a trip to Asia where he spent some time in Vietnam and South Korea. So today, Matthew will be providing a market overview of these markets and go over some of the planned activities that are coming up and how you could potentially participate. But yeah, before I turn it over to Matthew, a final reminder that the Q&A is active. Feel free to submit your questions at any time throughout Matthew's presentation. We'll definitely make sure to get it answered. So without further ado, Matthew, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much. So yeah, good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matthew McFetridge. Alongside my father, I started a company back in 2015 to try to leverage the beauty of what New York was offering and take it back with me where I was living at the time to China. And so through all of the ups and downs between the US-China relationship, we've been really active in trying to promote New York wines as a point of pride from where I'm from, and also to introduce to the places I was living a little bit more of where what my home was creating. So I've had the pleasure of working with a bunch of you that I see in your names here. Those of you who I haven't met, I hope to meet you one day soon. So for this program year, like last program year in the Asia Pacific, we're working with 3 target markets: Hong Kong, South Korea, and Vietnam. And just a little bit of a background on these markets quickly. I only put 4 little statistics here because I think if we get too deep into it, we kind of lose the focus. But so when we look at these markets, Hong Kong, South Korea, and Vietnam, we're looking at a pretty sizable chunk of people here. Hong Kong being the smallest, 7.5 million people, but with a pretty strong GDP per capita, kind of a younger population. And while it's not so relevant for the Hong Kong market inside of their wine buying, for us as New York wine producers, I think a lot of our consumer base is in that middle class. And so I like to put down what percentage of these populations are middle class, because that's, I think, where we have our strongest success. And so 24% of the population of Hong Kong is middle class. There's a huge range of very wealthy people at the other end of that middle class range, but it's important to look at that. And 2 more interesting countries, the South Korea and Vietnam, if we look, they get younger in their average age, and also the range of the middle class is quite interesting. If we look at Vietnam, 10% of the population is the middle class, so that's about 10 million people, but it's a very young population. And so when we look at Vietnam, our focus is not necessarily maybe selling containers of wine tomorrow, but investing in this market, and as Vietnam matures, we will ride those waves with it. And New York will be as well known as maybe say Chile or Australia as we go along with all the education we're putting in. And Korea, which seems to be the darling of the world of wine these days, has a young population. It's got a strong middle class. It's got good GDP per capita and a very healthy population. I think for those of you who sit in on the Japan training, you'll see that Japan is an aging society. Korea, not so much. And right now, there's a lot of momentum in the Korea market, and that we're really excited to leverage the past 2 years of efforts upon. So we're going to do a little deep dive in each of these core markets. Hong Kong, I think for anyone who's been in the Asia program in the last few years, it's still been a focus of ours. One thing that we like to reiterate when we talk about Hong Kong is that it's not a volume-driven market, it's a branding market. So people from all over Asia stop into Hong Kong, they see wines in the various F&B outlets or retail shops, and it's a really good way to have exposure. But some of the issues we found with Hong Kong in the past is obviously Hong Kong suffered greatly with COVID. We saw the wine market essentially crash because it's so reliant on the on-premise side of the business. But with 2023 and all the restrictions having been lifted, we're starting to see growth again. Growth in both consumption inside of Hong Kong and as Hong Kong as a re-export hub for Asia. So again, it's not a volume market, but it's important to try to promote there and try to get some business there, because I think for anyone who wants to build their brand across the Asia Pacific, it's helpful to be, in interesting wine bars, clubs, restaurants, etc. And again, Hong Kong is known for its fine wine market. There's a lot of wealthy individuals in Hong Kong. I think someone said amongst even the expat population, the average salary is about $200,000 in Hong Kong. So it's a very high net worth city-state. And so there is consumption. And with that, that means there's always new restaurants and bars opening that want to have new and exciting offerings. And so I think New York really still fits that niche of interesting and exciting. So there's opportunity there. And then, of course, Hong Kong does not levy taxes or duty on their imported wines. So you can get the wines in Hong Kong very affordably. The big issue, of course, with Hong Kong is it's such a small place that storage and shipping premiums can be quite high. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind when we're talking about doing business in Hong Kong. And again, if anyone has questions, I can see the Q&A box. If you have any questions, please don't be shy to type them in there and we'll get to them. South Korea. So this past March, we were lucky enough to get our first group of New York wine producers over to Korea. And I think people that visited were quite impressed with both the interest in wine and specifically the interest in New York wine. And so as we continue our efforts in Asia Pacific, South Korea really is becoming a darling, I would say, of the wine business, both because of this free trade agreement with American wine. So you're going to start seeing a lot more California, Washington, Oregon, and hopefully New York wine. The taxes are fairly reasonable. There's no duty on the wine, but there is a 72% liquor tax that's levied. And then on the wholesale side, once it's sold from the distributor, there's a 30% education tax. And then, of course, the consumer pays 10% VAT. So whereas, there in some markets, we have a strong duty levied, in Korea, at least we get by with that. And then what was interesting is across the world, I think everybody noticed that wine and alcohol consumption kind of peaked during COVID for whatever reason. Drinking at home, I like to say, was probably people were bored. Yeah. So people became more interested in wine delivery and options that they could get access to. And so we started seeing a consumption increase in Korea at that time. And while we saw overall throughout the COVID years and into this part of 2023, a slight decrease in volume, the price per liter has increased, which is a good thing for folks like us in New York because our wines are never going to be cheap wines. So that means people are trading up in value. Maybe they're drinking a little bit less of Yellowtail, nothing against Yellowtail, but maybe more of, let's just say, Kendall Jackson, shall we? So that's a good opportunity for us to tap into that, really touch base with the consumers and introduce New York. And then the last big thing I like to touch upon is that we're starting to see more women entering the market. And so historically, Korea has been a strong drinking culture, professionally with colleagues and superiors, or even just socially with friends and family. The alcohol consumption is quite strong. And of course, they have beer, but soju, and not really any serious domestic wine production. There are some wineries there making wines, but nothing that would compete with imported wine. And so now we're starting to see women joining the wine consumption demographic because they don't want to drink beer because it makes them bloated and full, and soju is maybe a bit too hard. So they're turning towards wine, which is exciting for us. And then Vietnam. So I was just in Vietnam last week, meeting with some folks that we do some work with. And Vietnam, of course, is not a wealthy country, but it is an investment market that we see a lot of potential with. Home to 100 million people, rising middle class. It's a young population. People are interested in American culture. There's about a 95% favorable opinion of the United States in Korea, which is crazy considering we only normalized relationships about 30 years ago. And while right now it is still not a wealthy market, most wine is still sold under that $10 range. It's growing. There's more and more availability of international wines. I think Italy's seeing a big expansion. Chile and Australia, they see a huge expansion in the market. But you're starting to also see more and more American wine brands, which is, of course, important for us because we want to ride those coattails. And the USDA is very active in promoting not just soy and beef and pork exports, but also working with us to really leverage our US New York wine exports. Red wine is still a #1 category for them, and that is a legacy left over from the French. But there is growth and appreciation across the entire on-premise spectrum. You see more and more younger people out drinking. Some markets like Japan, we start to see a little bit less of the younger generation drinking, but in Vietnam, they're still going out celebrating with friends. And that booming middle class really is starting to see the needle tick with wine consumption. And we have organizations like the Saigon Sommelier Association, which is a group of young sommeliers and F&B professionals that really want to strengthen the reputation of wine in the country and build that market. Taxation can be a bit tricky in Vietnam. Of course, The official tax rate is 50% import tax. There's a 25% special consumption tax followed by a 10% value-added tax. But we still have things that pop up that can make wine sales more expensive. Of course, warehousing, making sure things are chilled on the dock, refrigeration, getting wines into, temperature controlled warehouses, and then that last minute mile sale, because 60% of the business is still on premise. But when we talk about the other 40%, that's wine that's getting shipped all around the country, big retail purchases for companies, gifting towards the Tet holiday. And the big competitors for us in the Vietnam is Chile, France, and Australia. They make up the lion's share of wine. And then, of course, the rest of the world of wine is split in another 50%. To make sure there's no questions here. Okay. So challenges. I think this is something that we always talk with our partners in these markets about for New York wine. New York is far away from Asia. Personally speaking, it took me 20 some hours to get home the other night. So that's on a jetliner, right? So we are far, and it requires a lot longer time on the water. Wines leaving New York go down to the Panama Canal and then over the Pacific Ocean, and it can take, up to 60, 70 days if all things are working to get wine there. And so that means that logistics costs can be a little bit more expensive. That coupled with taxation can make New York wines a bit more expensive. And obviously, we try to overcome price sensitivity when we do our marketing, but it is something to be realistic about. Also, these markets are new to New York wine. I mean, sometimes if you go to Buffalo, New York, and you ask people, have they tried Finger Lakes wines? They'll probably say no. So we have to overcome that obstacle of saying, okay, New York is not just a city. It's a big, beautiful state with a lot going on inside of it. So it takes time. It takes a lot of education. I think most of us, if we weren't in the wine business 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, would we be as aware of New York wine as we are today? So we have to make sure that we just keep pushing on. We need continuous time and effort and support from folks like yourselves who are interested in building a global brand. We're in the business of the marathon, not the sprint. Price. We're never going to be inexpensive wines, nor do I think we want to be inexpensive wines. I think New York is lucky to have so many amazing craftsmen and women that are making these beautiful wines with great story and provenance. And that's something that you just can't slash a discounted price on. So with our education needs to be the focus that we make these wines and they are this expensive because of these many things, right? So we want to make sure that we are explaining to these markets why our wines are not going to be California Zinfandel, white Zinfandel cheap. And another, challenge with that price is the dollar is stronger right now. So big complaint that I heard from folks in Vietnam and in Malaysia this past couple of weeks is that the US dollar is a lot stronger. So their home currencies being so much weaker makes the wine more expensive when it comes in. So, I never like to tell producers, you have to figure out how to change your price structure, but do keep in mind that while we are building these markets and opportunities arise, there will be some conversation probably on price and cost. And so just keep that in the back of your head. And then lastly, and it's not the last challenge for New York wine producers, I think if we all sat together, we could list a lot of different challenges we have for New York wine producers, but one that's certainly relevant, and hopefully this is the last year I ever have to talk about the pandemic, is that these pre-pandemic spending habits have not yet returned. If you ask folks in China, in Korea, in Vietnam, are they spending as much? Not really. They're worried. The economy is not as good as they hoped. Tourism dollars haven't come back yet. Consumers aren't going out and spending as much. So consumption is down a little bit, but hopefully in the next year, we're going to start to see that change. I'm optimistic. Okay, so that's a little bit of the overview. Let's see here. Oops. Okay, so the activities we've got planned. So kind of leveraging some of the successes I've seen emulated through Western Europe and in Canada and Japan, for the first time, we all got together in my colleagues in Canada and Western Europe and the UK and Japan, and started sharing some ideas. And so I think this year was a really exciting year in the program because we have so much more information available to us. We have pre-pandemic, we've got pandemic, and now post-pandemic success stories that we can really leverage, and I think will make a better export program than even the years past. So with Hong Kong, so we are still working on education in Hong Kong. The big resistance this past year was that, well, the economy hasn't returned to normal, or restaurants aren't ordering as much, people aren't coming back, the expats have left, people aren't spending as much. So we took that as an opportunity to then say, okay, well, let's just keep working on our education. Let's figure out a way to get a larger audience instead of renting out expensive venue space, leveraging the success we saw with the Western Europe team during COVID of reformatting wines and getting out tasting kits. I think that's a really good way to say, okay, I'm going to meet with winery X, Y, and Z. We're going to have a little webinar. We can record it. We can get these kits made up. And if they can join during that time, because Asia is 12 hours behind, great. If not, they'll have a recording that they can then try at their own pace. So it saves us some money, it gives us some more flexibility, and then also obviously gives us a larger audience to touch upon. Canada, Western Europe, UK, a bit luckier that the 6-hour time difference at the extreme isn't so bad. But for us in Asia, not everybody wants to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning tasting wine, or at midnight tasting wine. And so also, I think you've heard we have an inbound trade mission coming into New York. And while you would think that everybody and their brother would jump on a free trip to New York, we're still waiting to hear back from a few other people to see if they can make it. It is a far trip for such a short amount of time, but we have some invitations sent out. One confirmation is our friend Rees Choi, who is a great advocate for New York wine, master of wine candidate, or excuse me, master of sommelier candidate, and he's been a good partner for us, and he'll be visiting New York. And in Korea, similar to what we were planning in Hong Kong, really focusing on that education component and really casting a net out to as many consumers that are involved in the trade as possible. So reformatting wines into these tubes. There's a picture here. I was quite impressed with these tubes during the pandemic. I thought they were great. But again, building on the inbound trip to Korea we had in March, and knocking on the doors and making sure that our friends in Korea are always continuously tasting New York wine to try to build capacity in that market, and hopefully bringing over some Korean members of the trade to New York in November. And Vietnam, which is kind of a pilot program, but again, really pushing that education component. We at the foundation has done a great job working to get the wine reference course updated, and we thought that tying that into some kind of certificate of completion to really strengthen accountability and capacity for young Vietnamese consumers would be a great idea. So we are going to run a wine course live in Vietnam on the 19th and 20th of March in 2024, with an examination at the end to really make sure that our friends in Vietnam are taking it seriously and that they're learning about New York, and not just, the broad overviews that master classes can kind of sum up in an hour, but a 2-day course. So we've had that reference guide, the truncated version, translated into Vietnamese, and that will be ready to go shortly. So we're very excited. It's for the first time New York Wine and Grape Foundation materials are in Vietnamese. Okay, and then lastly, the goals. Obviously, we've got activities. We want to make sure that our activities are matching what our expectations are. And so for goals, I think I'm a salesperson at heart first. And so for me, I like to see wineries find importers. I think that makes me the happiest at the end of the day, is if we can get those conversations going and folks can say, oh, great, I have an importer here, or I have an importer here, because at the end of the day, we're trying to create global brands, and sales is the only way to really do that. But of course, we want to make sure that we showcase New York to the right members of the trade, really improve our seminar series, get more into the nitty-gritty, show them that, New York is not just Chardonnay, Cab Franc, and Riesling, but there's a wide range of styles that are available, and drive greater consumer awareness through professional events, and as with Vietnam, really increase the accountability. And we'll see that right after the exams if these students pass the exam. I don't think, we're not going to make it so hard that people are failing, but we want to make sure that they're doing their homework, studying, reading that 50 or 25-page guide, and being aware that New York has a lot more to offer than just a few different styles. So that kind of sums up the presentation. I hope if you have any questions, you can either type them in the chat box here or reach out to me. I'm usually very flexible. Quickest way to get a hold of me is give me a ring on my cell phone. The next best way is to shoot me an email, and we can set up a one-on-one consultation time. I know your schedules are busy. My schedule sometimes is a bit up and down, but I really want to make sure that if you have any questions, and it's not just in the next few weeks, it's throughout the year. If you have any questions that you feel comfortable and are open to chatting with me, sometimes I have the answer, sometimes I don't, but if I don't, I try my best to get it for you. Because at the end of the day, like Tamara said, I'm from here. The success of the New York wine region is, I hold it quite personal and quite dear to heart. So always here to help.
Thanks, Matthew. Great presentation. We can wait here for a beat to see if any questions come through. But as I've said in the other presentations, definitely would recommend contacting Matthew to set up some one-on-one consultation times. That would, I think, be very valuable and useful for you if you're considering seriously answering any of these markets. And like I mentioned at the beginning, Matthew has a really great network and extensive contacts. So if he doesn't have the answer, he knows the people to pull in to help with any questions you may have. So let's see. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, that was definitely a brainchild of Matthew. So we're excited to test that out and see how it goes. And Matthew, I don't know, did it say when that was going to be on the slide?
Yeah, March 19th and 20th, 2024.
Okay. So I think, yeah, that's still a ways away, but I'm sure we'll be putting a bottle books together for that and sourcing out some wines. If you're really interested, I recommend reaching out to Matthew, and you guys can talk about featuring a wine for that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Wonderful. All right.
Well, Tamara, I'm not seeing a lot of questions come in
Yeah.
because Matthew covered everything so well, I think. So,
Definitely.
but as usual, I think what happens is people go back and they'll be like, oh, I should have asked that. So thank you for sharing your email address for those folks who may not have been familiar with Matthew before. We'll definitely get this out along with a copy of the recording. And Matthew, if there's any other resources that you think you want to share, feel free to send those along and we'll make sure to get those out to folks as well. But otherwise, yeah, we're just looking forward to getting started. And as I've reminded folks before, if you were just checking in on this market to see, do I A, want to participate in the export program, and B, is this the market for me? Now's the time to join, so that as we ramp up these activities, this is kind of the last time you can participate as a non-program kind of participant. And yeah, we'll send out the link so that you can join the program if you haven't already. And we'll make sure that clearly you have some contact information now. So thank you for this. We appreciate your time. And yeah, we look forward to working with you and to another exciting program year. Thank you both for being here and everybody on the Zoom call. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.